Basically, there are three people in my life, and it's me as the professional caregiver, it's me as a recovering addicted person, and it's me as the professional Christian. And by the professional Christian, I mean people who get paid to be good. Those three people get up every day, and they load themselves up onto the bus, and we all get to fight over who gets to drive. The great thing about the bus is that the people on it all think they're the only people that exist. I was always told that I was uniquely talented. I took that to mean that I was unique. I took that to mean that I was special. With that uniqueness came entitlement. The addict decided that it was terminally unique, and that meant that none of the help that applied to anyone else would apply to that person. They were special. The caregiver was lonely, and he decided that he was unique and that no one would understand the things he thinks and feels on a daily basis. And the professional Christian decided that he was unique because he was a professional Christian, and he knew he wasn't the person that people had decided he was, but he didn't know how to tell them any differently. The problem is that my persona had become an idol, and I believed that all three of those people were unique. And I used all three of those people to justify my behavior. When I discovered alcohol, it was a great thing because I could use it to get all three of these people to coexist and get along. No one argued with one another whenever the alcohol was in the picture. It was when sobriety came into the picture that there began to be a struggle. And I know that sounds like it's a little schizophrenic, and it kind of is. But I didn't know who was going to drive the bus. I discovered that what I called my uniqueness is really what the Bible calls self. And that my biggest enemy was myself. And it was myself that wanted to drive the bus. So at the root of my addiction, I realized, was a huge sense of entitlement. The caregiver had a huge sense of entitlement. The professional Christian had a huge sense of entitlement. And that became the thing that could justify all my behavior. My greatest fear at the time was I couldn't imagine living life without anesthesia. I was experiencing watching my wife deteriorate. I was experiencing shame for the example that I had been to my daughter. It's hard to grieve people you haven't lost yet. And it's hard to grieve things that you do lose while you still have the person with you. I didn't have a category for that. And I knew if I quit drinking, I was going to have to get real with myself about where I was. And I was so pissed off at God that I couldn't imagine doing that without anesthesia. I had panic attacks whenever I would get down to a certain level on the bottle, and I always had a backup. When my friends looked at my life, most of my friends didn't blame me for drinking, which made it much easier to keep doing it. I knew that there would be a day where I had to pay the piper. I had been renting the piper for years, and I was running up quite a tab. I didn't know what that was going to look like. There's a group of men in this church called the Samson Society. This is a group of men that walk through extremely deep water. They share their secrets because they know they're only as sick as their secrets. I wasn't sure I bought that, and I wasn't sure I wanted to let anyone in on my secret. And I certainly didn't know if I was ready to let go of my secret. I was trying to manage my secret. After maybe a year of going to meetings and hearing guys' stories and hearing how God was moving in their lives, I had a friend that suggested that maybe I didn't believe that God could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I was a little offended because I sold God. I knew God. I knew how to spin God. I didn't just drink the God Kool-Aid. I sold the God Kool-Aid. Of course I know God can do that. What I didn't know was why he hadn't. My friend pointed out that maybe my sense of entitlement was bigger than God in my heart and my life and my mind. It's more than just doing the same thing and hoping it turns out differently. I had to think about that. I took my friend to coffee one day, and I sat down and I said, I think I have a drinking problem. Actually, I think I have a not drinking problem. Drinking is not a problem. Not drinking has gotten to be a problem. And he looked at me, And he asked me if I'd ever been to an AA meeting, and I said no, because I wasn't like those people, and I didn't need to go sit around and listen to people moan about their drunk-a-log. I just needed help managing my problem. He took me to a meeting, and he took me to another meeting, and he took me to another meeting. He didn't tell me, well, they meet at noon down here at the church. He went with me, and he said, I will sit there with you, and tomorrow we will go again, and tomorrow we will go again, and you will listen to the similarities and not the differences, and you will begin to see whether or not you think you fit into this or not. Nobody's going to tell you whether you have a problem, but maybe if you hear enough stories. I began to get courage, and I talked to my Samson brothers about my life and my problem, and I began to call people, and people began to call me, and I began to have a little break in the bubble of anonymity and autonomy. Secrecy is a powerful thing. This isn't all ancient history. This is only 4.5 years ago that I even began to tell my secret and that I began the journey into sobriety. I was a worship leader here for a long time, and no one knew my problem. I knew how to manipulate my relationships within the staff. I wasn't afraid of losing my job. I was afraid that people would be disillusioned. I was afraid people would find out I hadn't handled things perfectly. I never found anyone on staff that shamed me when they found out about this. And I realized that once I told my secret, the ground didn't open up, lightning didn't fall from the sky, and people didn't die because they found out that David wasn't perfect. So every day that I get up, I have to decide not if I'm going to drive the bus, but if I trust God enough to just let go of the bus. My friend Nate is the friend I mentioned who actually took me to those meetings and challenged me. And Nate would always say that God never called people out by themselves. He always sent them in twos. He always sent them together. It was a band of brothers. The people who did go out by themselves didn't fare so well. For instance, Samson, which we have named our group after, not because he was the biblical hero, but because he was a loner, and that we have seen the danger of living life alone. My thought for people who are living secretly is that you have to tell one person. You just have to tell one person. God will show up, but you can't hold something in your own twisted perspective and expect change.